Good morning, everyone. We should be live now. Welcome again to another CRACY webinar from the CRACY webinar series that we have been organizing over these past months. Today, we will be tackling the topic of remote attestation for CRA compliance. Here, we are joined today by Jordi from Ghent University. Jordi will be providing you with the Okay, I will now share the full screen. That should be it. Jordi will be providing you with a deep look, a deep dive into the role of remote attestation. Before we go into there, I would like to take a chance to introduce the CRACY project to some of you that you might already be aware of. CRACY is a project that was born and started back in December 2024. Before that, the project laid its foundations in other initiatives such as IoT SBOM. In this case, back in 2021, the US passed Executive Order 14028. There already private companies that wanted to access contracts with the federal government, they needed to put some measures in place regarding security by design, zero network trust, or leveraging software bill of materials in order to track all their software components and dependencies. In this case, from LSEC Leaders in Security, we saw an opportunity in order to do that, to increase, foster the adoption of SBOMs within industrial IoT organizations in the Flanders region. We deployed IoT SBOM project, and a natural transition happened when Cyber Resilience Act arrived to Europe, that there was an opportunity in order to build a consortium of 12 different entities, 12 different expert companies, as we will see later on, in order to make Cyber Resilience Act easier, especially on the small, medium enterprises that might find it very challenging to navigate Cyber Resilience Act. As for CRACY project, as mentioned, started back in December 2024. It will be in principle ending by May 2027. What we have done so far is that, on the one hand, we are building security tools secured by CRACY, as we like to call them. Some of them, they are CRACY SASE or CRACY Repo that we had a webinar yesterday. In case that you missed that, it will be available under our website. We also have compliance tools that are aimed in order to help companies, to help SMEs streamline their compliance obligations under Cyber Resilience Act. We also have a series of knowledge products that we have been publishing into the world, including some white papers that will arrive, some guidance, and we have at the start of the project laid the foundation for some of these different tools by conducting, as we like to call it, a demystification of the Cyber Resilience Act, translating the different annexes of Cyber Resilience Act into essential security by design requirements, vulnerability handling requirements, documentation requirements, also further exploring the role of cloud secure access or of risk management, risk assessments within Cyber Resilience Act. We have had some previous webinars on these different topics. We will have further webinars also on those. Feel free to check them, and in case that you would like to have more information about them, we are here always open to help you. With all of this, we are developing a series of use cases with manufacturers of products with digital elements, being these products with digital elements default products, class 1, class 2, under Cyber Resilience Act. In these cases, we go hand in hand with the PD manufacturers during a 4 or 5 month process, where first we decide what PDE we will focus on. Then we conduct the qualification of this PDE to understand whether it's in the scope of not of CRA and what type of product it is. And from there, we develop a series of recommendations on what are the different security by design requirements that should be implemented, vulnerability handling, and what could be some of the next steps regarding documentation, or how, when Cyber Resilience Act arrives, the CE marks should be affixed. As for the consortium, I mentioned that it is led by LSEC Leaders in Security, today, in this case, represented by myself, Hector. Also, you should have seen Ulrich from other webinars, also CEO of LSEC Leaders in Security. LSEC is a Belgian non-for-profit association. We were born back in 2002 as a spin-off of KU Leuven University, always focusing on cybersecurity, acting as a digital catalyst, bridging the gap between industry and some of the policy, legal priorities that have arrived, will arrive from the EU. And in this case, over the past 3-4 years, we have increased our exposure to the Digital Europe program, which is the program under which CRACY is funded. We have other projects running, such as KISME, in order to enhance cybersecurity maturity of small and medium enterprises all across the EU. We also have Incidentron in order to harmonize cybersecurity incident reporting. We have KISD, where we have deployed more than 4 million euros in financial support to third parties, with last open call that just closed a couple of weeks ago, where also manufacturers of products with digital elements could apply in order to fund pen tests. And with us in this project, we have a very wide array of different entities. We have entities coming from academia, such as VUB Software Languages Lab, or here represented today by Jordi, ID Lab from Ghent University, also dependent of IMEC. We have institutional partners represented by NCS in Romania, the National Coordination Center that is dependent of the European Cybersecurity Competence Center located in Romania. We have legal partners represented by Timelex, and a very solid composition of technical partners represented by entities such as CU, Resilion, Exit, Jimber, Torion, NoCodex, and Position that are developing a series of these tools. All of us, we are developing this series of tools that I have just mentioned in order to, on the one hand, help secure the different processes, and on the other, streamline compliance regarding vulnerability handling and documentation requirements that are contained within Cyber Resilience Act. Why do we need Cyber Resilience Act? Why do we need more resilience? Well, with the project, we are aiming to support the implementation of Cyber Resilience Act. Those of you present here today, you will most likely be aware of some of the struggles of the implementation of the legislation, the costs that it has, the different resources, both human and in terms of funds that you will need to implement in order to comply with Cyber Resilience Act. This is why we are helping these different SMEs enhance the cybersecurity of their products with digital elements. And overall, with activities such as today's webinar, we have focus on what are the different methods or the practical tools that can help you simplify compliance. As a recap of some of the other webinars, you can go to cracy.eu/events. There you have the different recordings of the webinars that we have had so far this year. We are now running 12, 13 webinars deep in just a couple of months. We have more to come, as we will see later on. Again, feel free to check them. They can be a great starting point if you are in the first steps into your CRA compliance journey. There you will see some of the different topics that you will need to control, to domain in order to become CRA compliant. And they also have related knowledge products available under our website. CRA, as you might be aware of, it applies to consumer electronics. Over these past decades, we have had many different incidents regarding consumer electronics. Cloud pets come to mind. This also applies to household appliances, gadgets, air fryers, coffee machines, fridges. They are all in the scope of Cyber Resilience Act. They might be subject to some vulnerabilities that might not be patched or might be exploitable. It applies to toys. It can apply also to sex toys. So again, covering a very wide range of consumer electronics, but also business electronics. Think about firewalls, identity services engines. Think about identity access managers. They are all in the scope of Cyber Resilience Act. Not only that, but over this past year, several CVEs, several vulnerabilities have been discovered, unveiled for critical electronic cybersecurity, Dover Fueling, Rockwell, also in industrial control systems such as PLCs, in this case from Siemens. They are in the scope of Cyber Resilience Act, and the legislation, the goal is that these products will be maintained all across their life cycle, and the vulnerability handling processes are in place in order to report, as we will see, as we can mention later on, to report the different vulnerabilities incidents to ENISA, and that they will be patched with undue delay. As for the white papers, we are publishing this month more than 10 white papers. I think that there will be 14, 15 white papers on the different essential requirements, vulnerability handling requirements, documentation requirements, how to implement those, cloud conditional access, software updates, cybersecurity control requirements. Feel free to check them. And also, if you have doubts and you are in a very initial stage of getting to understand Cyber Resilience Act, we have, as we like to call it, a tool called the PDE Wizard under pde.cra-c.eu. You will be able there to check very quickly whether Cyber Resilience Act applies to your product or not, whether your product falls under some of the exclusions that are there for Cyber Resilience Act. For example, if instead of Cyber Resilience Act, aviation or maritime regulation does apply, and then Cyber Resilience Act does not. Or in the case that you are subject to Cyber Resilience Act, you will get their notification where it will indicate that indeed you have a PDE, a product with detailed elements, and if you want further support, you will be able to contact the CRACY consortium, and we can see bilaterally how some of these measures will need to be implemented. As for today, Jordi will drive you around the concept of remote attestation, what it is, how it works. You will not need to know it beforehand, in the sense that Jordi will start from scratch, also will connect it to CRA compliance. When your product needs it, not all products need it, but those that need it, how you will be able to deploy it and have your product audit ready. So without further ado, we are here joined today by Jordi from Ghent University. Jordi, more than welcome. Great to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. I'll be sharing my screen now. You should all be seeing my slides, if that's correct. Yep. Okay, so thank you again for the introduction, and welcome to my CRACY webinar titled CRA Compliance, Don't Just Claim It, Prove It. This will be, since we only planned like 30 minutes, it will be more of an introduction into mainly the integrity requirements of the CRA, and then how remote attestation fits into that. So yeah, what we'll be discussing today, a small part of the CRA, so the CRA has a lot of requirements, confidentiality, access control, secure by design. There's an entire list, which is also on the CRACY website. And one small part of that is integrity. And today I would like to discuss a little more about how you can sort of try to comply with these integrity requirements. We identified a few levels, and one of those levels is remote attestation. I also have a few slides, of course, on like what is remote attestation, a short introduction, and then like how can you use it for PD integrity. And obviously I'm a researcher, so we do like our future work. So I have like, I promise it's not too long, like one slide on where we see the future of this type of stuff and what we think should still happen. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, who's going to do the talking? Me. I am a researcher and an engineer at the ID Lab Research Group, which is both part of Ghent University and IMAC. I work on remote attestation, which is why I'm the one doing this talk today. My expertise is mainly in focused on the cloud and especially right now confidential computing, but it sort of translates really well into other products as well. I'm not a CRA expert, really. We have a lot of other people for that in the CRACY project. but I am a like technical person who's trying to link my technical expertise up to the CRA requirements. We have a little Q&A session as well. I currently can't see it because I'm on my slides, but after this talk, I will take a look at it. If we don't get to your question, or you have a question afterwards, or you're someone watching this in like a video format or something, my email address is here. Feel free to shoot me an email or connect on LinkedIn if you have any questions or you want to discuss anything related to this. So, maybe we should start with what are the CRA requirements for integrity, right? And I have like between brackets applied to devices because PDEs are very broad and encompasses a lot of stuff. And I think we have a lot of other webinars on like what exactly it encompasses. But this talk will specifically be about the integrity more of devices. So just a quick side note. PD integrity requirements. Yeah, this is a legal text. That I copy pasted straight from the CRA. I'll read it once. Protect the integrity of stored, transmitted, or otherwise processed data, personal or other commands, programs, and/or configuration against any manipulation or modification not authorized by the user, and report on corruptions. It's a lot of legal text, but luckily we have a lot of really good people part of the CRACY project who actually did a really good job at translating these essential requirements into something that's a bit more understandable for you and me. I mean, mostly for me. I included the link here because I'm quickly going to go over these little bullet points, but our people did a really good job of writing this out in a lot more detail. So feel free to visit this link to read about integrity. And we also have a bunch of pages about all the other essential requirements. But basically, they can be translated into the first one is establish and maintain trusted integrity verification, which basically first thing is like boot check, and we'll go into a lot more detail on that when we reach the remote attestation part. But basically, proving or knowing what software is actually running there with signatures and stuff like that. The second one is reacting safely when integrity is compromised. There's a lot of options to do this depending on what device you have. I think like triggering alerts is like pretty much an ideal situation, but smaller devices that don't have that capability could just return into a safe mode or reboot to a known good configuration. Yeah, the third one's pretty straightforward, right? It's using best practice cryptography and key management. So don't write your own implementation of RSA. I think that's pretty straightforward. And if you like store keys and stuff, try and do that in a secure device. Yeah, integrity during the operation. I think I can split that up into sort of two separate parts here. One is like writing your program with like programming best practices, and there's like a few examples here, is in like do input validation, do error handling, so your software is never really in an undefined state or in a weird state. And then the second one is on the system, and that's I think more relevant to the talk today as well, is a lot of kernel integrity mechanisms. A lot of the integrity mechanisms you can use on systems are basically kernel features. Stuff like limiting file access, limiting user account access. So we have those two during operation. Yeah, atomic and reversible software installation. So either software installs or it's a complete rollback. You don't want to be left with like a weird in-between system. And then finally, we need temper detection and protection to actually notice when our integrity is no longer intact. So yeah, feel free to read up on these on our website a little more in detail. Now, how do you comply with this? A lot of EU regulation is like risk-based approaches, and same here, where you want to do a risk analysis first. So basically take a look at, okay, what is our product, what are the threat vectors, what risks are there, and importantly, like what are the consequences? Are we touching really high sensitive data that we need to be really careful about, or are the stakes far lower? So you start with this analysis, and then you decide on what security measures you need to take. Again, I'm linking to some really great resources from our CRACY website, where they detail this a lot better. So yeah, software integrity or integrity levels. I sort of define these like 3 levels that I'm going to use to run through my presentation. And the first one we sort of lovingly call deploy and pray, in which you set something up in a trusted state and you ship it somewhere and you just assume that it stays trusted and that all the measures you put into place will hold. The second one is where we sort of add an agent, and that's where I don't know if you remember when I read the entire text really quickly. At the end, it said, "And you should report on this." This is where you get the initial best effort reporting, and then remote attestation I sort of see as the ultimate third level where we can actually verify that reporting and we can like cryptographically measure and verify it. So yeah. Level 1, deploy and pray, basically how you ship it in a trusted state. And basically this comes down to what we call like device local integrity measures. And a lot of this is sort of rooted in the Linux kernel and are going to be kernel security features, and then like supported by secure boot, which has its own issues with like, key management and the fact that it will basically boot anything that is signed. And one of the main issues that I see here is using the Linux kernel as basically the root of trust, the thing you trust to secure your system or to provide integrity. And like the last 2 weeks or the last month or something has been, has shown us like again that the Linux kernel is extremely massive. There's a lot of code in there. There's a lot of probably undiscovered bugs and CVs in there. So it's not really ideal. So yeah, the first level, deploy and pray, we have some challenges, right? How are you going to recover from failure if these integrity measurements or these integrity measures trip? For example, if your secure boot signature check fails, the system will probably just not start. And depending on what your system is, that might be a problem. You'd have to send someone out to recover the device, inspect the device, and figure out what actually happened. The root of trust, the Linux kernel is a root of trust. One, there's a lot of vulnerabilities. You could set up secure boot to sort of guarantee the integrity of your kernel, but yeah, managing these keys, keeping them updated, revoking these keys, and again, it doesn't prevent or it doesn't tell you exactly what is running on your system. And again, like there's no option to report on it. You don't really know what's happening. So this is like the lowest level, and you do have some security guarantees, but it's really difficult to report on this and to prove that the integrity is actually there. So a second level is where you could maybe add an agent to it that gives you some level of communication, sort of a best effort reporting. We still build on the first level, right? We still use all of these like kernel level security integrity features. We still ship it in a trusted state, but we might add some software that can communicate with us and that can report on the state. For example, if you send in an update, you might have an update manager that makes sure that the update was actually applied. Yeah, you could also have something that forwards logs or data on the system. Now, there's also a few challenges here, right? While we do get logging, we still sort of rely on the Linux kernel again, because like your software runs on top of it. Like the kernel is privileged compared to your agent most likely. So if that is compromised, it's really difficult to sort of trust the agent, which is why in the last slide I called it like best effort. So yeah, if your agent gets compromised, I added between like brackets ARM trust zone. It will lead us way too far in this talk if I go into that, but basically there are ways to, if you don't want to go for like full cryptographic measurements and remote attestation in the next step, there are ways to sort of isolate this agent. For example, ARM trust zone, basically putting it simply, provides you another privilege level above the kernel, and you could potentially put your agent there. Something to keep in mind, and that's also going to carry over to the third part, remote attestation, is privacy risks. If you're collecting data, if you're collecting measurements or logs or anything on the status of a system, you have to be careful. again, it really depends on like what type of PDE you're developing. If there's users that are like actively interacting with like the computer as a system, you run the risk of collecting personally identifiable information, and then you get into like the whole GDPR thing. So I'm just putting it here. Make sure that if you use these like agent and loggings and collect data, that you take that into account, so you don't get into any issues. Okay, so the first level, we have these like device local things, and then the second level, we have agents that can let you know what is going on in your device. And then the third level, I like to add something else to it, and that's remote attestation. Basically, we have this agent, but right now it just provides us data that it basically, yeah, that's no way like temper resistant or cannot really be verified. It's a best effort reporting. So the question is like, is there a way that we can prove the actual integrity and the actual state of a system, right? Because we rely a lot on the Linux kernel to do stuff for us, but we should be able to like verify which Linux kernel and what version, and make sure that we know what's actually running. And that's where remote attestation comes in, and the first part of that is sort of collecting information, right? Because the process of remote attestation basically revolves around measuring things in a secure way, and then providing these measurements to a remote party to make decisions based off of that data, in this case on the integrity of a system. So technically speaking, our core of trust here is going to be your CPU. We consider the CPU to be a trusted entity. While it is probably not completely airtight, it is really difficult to mess with a CPU. You know, the features on it are really small. Like even if you put an electron microscope on it, the chance that you really are going to be able to play around with it a lot is very low. So we consider it secure. And then the question is like, okay, we trust the CPU, but like, how do we extend this, you know, further down the chain into the operating system? Because it's great that you trust the CPU to you know, execute things you want it to execute, but your program is never directly interacting with the CPU. It usually gets scheduled by the kernel and stuff. So you need to have this entire trust chain from the CPU to your application. And we can use something actually very common nowadays. It's I think the original spec is probably over 20 years old now. A TPM, and a lot of you might actually have TPMs. If you have a recent laptop that supports Windows, you will have one. You'll have one of those chips. Most servers have these chips. They are very cheap, so you can also just add them to your devices. And a TPM is actually contains a lot of features. For example, one of them is secure key storage, which is not something we're going to talk about here, but if you remember the requirements that I listed, that's one of them. So you could also consider that. But the main thing that I care about here is actually secure storage of measurements. Basically, a TPM has a bunch of what we call PCRs. PCRs are platform configuration registers, and they are basically storage spaces. They hold one single hash, and they have a very sort of very tightly defined API, as in like you can only call two functions on them. Either you clear them and they go back to zero, or you extend them, and that's what this little function here is, where you take the old value, you XOR it with some new measurement, and then you take a new hash of that and you store that instead. And what that actually results in is a trust chain that you can build, because we trust the CPU and the CPU measures itself. Then the CPU takes the measurements of the hash of the firmware and puts that in a PCR. The firmware that we've then measured measures the bootloader, puts it in PCR, and so on and so forth until we reach the user space. And this basically results in a chain of everything that we started, and in a sort of log of the entire system that is currently running, that we can then later query and check against what we know. Now you might ask, like, okay, but like, how do we detect if something goes wrong here? And basically the fun part here is that it works sort of like a Git commit history, where all the commits are basically linked to one another, and you can't really easily remove one out of there without having to recalculate the hashes of everything else. And it works the same here. You see that if we go through this chain, we end up eventually with this specific hash, which defines the state of our entire system. if we have, for example, firmware that is not valid, and this could be for any reason, right? This could be a new update, or this could be an older version, or this could be actually someone trying to maliciously flash firmware. Our CPU will measure itself again. It will measure this firmware, and it will put this hash of this firmware into the PCR. And you'll see now that these don't match anymore. And even if we continue to chain with a bootloader that's still the same, a kernel that's still the same, and the user space that's still the same, this hash, this final hash, will never ever be the same. So if we take this hash now, we can do one thing for starters. We can say, oh, this hash does not match what we expect, so the system is not in a valid state. We're not going to communicate with it. We're not going to push our software to it. We're not really going to do anything for it, or we're going to report on it. But since you have the entire log, it's not like secure boot where the system just doesn't boot. You get the entire log and you can see what the system is actually running. So you can analyze this, and you can say, oh, it's just the firmware, and then you could maybe go do a lookup on what the new firmware hashes are, and this system might actually pass anyways. So you get a lot of like flexibility and granularity in your evaluation. So basically, we want to extend this root of trust from the CPU into sort of the user space in the kernel, so we can actually use these kernel features that a lot of the integrity measures rely on in a way that is secure and that we can verify is actually secure. So yeah, we get a signed list of the boot chain, which I ran through, which tells us exactly what is running on the system. And then the next step is actually the remote part of the attestation, right? We've done like the measurements, we've collected the data, we know the data is in secure storage in the TPM. Now we need to have some sort of agent that can use this data, this secure data, instead of just random data collected in a non-secure way. And that's the remote part, right? You have your attester, which is just a device. In this case, it's probably going to be your PDE. It collects these measurements, and these measurements in the TPM, the TPM has a mechanism to sign these measurements to prove that it actually came from a valid TPM and thus was actually stored in secure storage. You can provide that evidence to a relying party. This could be, let's say, your update service. Your update service wants to make sure that the integrity mechanisms that were put in place are still there. So it requests the evidence. It has either an internal verifier or it sends it to a third party who can verify the evidence. And then based on that, it knows like, oh, the system is in the state that I expect. I'm going to push my software update to it. And you could even, after the software update, depending on what all you're measuring, you can measure it again and report on actually, like the successful completion of that software update. Okay, then we get back to our PDE requirements, right? And I kind of want to like fit in the remote attestation stuff in here a little and show you where it fits. So the first one, we talked about this boot, which you can either do with secure boot, or in this case, you want to have a measured boot, which gives you like more granularity and makes it easier to make decisions, and gives you a signed report you can use later. Reacting safely, I mean, remote attestation sort of by default is like a reporting tool where the remote party gets information about your device or your PDE and can make a decision based on that. Yeah, I grade out best practices in cryptography and key management because like the use of a TPM on its own kind of satisfies that that thing, so there's not that much to say about it anymore. Integrity during operations, yeah, we can now guarantee that a kernel is in a certain state, that a system is in a certain state, instead of secure boot that will just boot whatever is signed, even if it's outdated, even if it has vulnerabilities in here. Here we can check that during the operation it's actually running what we expect. Yeah, with updates, it's you can use it like the example I gave earlier in the last slide, where an update manager, before pushing an update, can check on the status of the device, and afterwards it can check on the status again. And yeah, tamper detection is basically what this entire thing is about, right? If someone tries to swap out the kernel with a malicious one, you will detect it. If someone tries to inject something in a bootloader, you will detect it. Same with the firmware. And the same on basically all of these levels. Now, I don't want to like oversell it, of course. Like I'm very much into this technology and I work with it every day. But I do recognize that there are some challenges and that this is not for every single PDE. there are like hardware issues. I think the main thing is that to do this securely, you need this hardware root of trust. I think in most cases, it's going to be a TPM. Like I said, you can easily build these into your systems. They're very cheap, but yeah, some devices just will not have one, and then you don't really have the option to do this. Another one is like the thing that I really work on is confidential computing. If you're talking about like remote data processing solutions, you could get integrity and confidentiality by using that. But of course, that's for very specific services and very specific devices. Another sort of tough situation is the fact that we rely on these like golden values. Everything is a hush, and it's not always easy to know what good hashes are and what bad hashes are. If your system updates and it installs a new kernel, you might not have that hash yet. So basically, you need to keep a database of fingerprints. I have one slide on future work where we present some like ideas on how we can do this better in the future. But right now, it really is still like fingerprinting a device, fingerprinting all of these separate components, and then checking against those fingerprints. And again, like the privacy thing comes back here, and it's arguably even more challenging depending on the type of device you have. If it is a device that users aren't really like actively, interacting with, it's probably fine. But if the device we're talking about is, I don't know, like a laptop or something, there is a privacy concern, especially with TPM, since their signatures are like identifiable across applications. I'm not a GDPR expert, but I think you can run into some trouble there. So I'd rather have you know this and take this into account. But of course, like it offers us a lot of advantages, right? We can get reporting that is accurate and cryptographically signed. We can get guarantees on software updates, guarantees on the current state, and these guarantees and our decision making on what to do with these devices becomes a lot more flexible, because we can take a look at all the individual parts that consist of a system. Before I wrap up, like a practical example, right? Because all of this was sort of now like really technical on like, okay, like these measurement chains and like how everything works and why you should trust this and why you can't trust this. But how can you actually use this? Keylime is a pretty mature now CNCF project that basically abstracts away a lot of the low-level stuff for you. Like the TPM spec is incredibly long. If you have to interact with it manually, it's quite hard. And Keylime basically abstracts this into a REST API interface, which makes it a lot easier. It can do stuff like deploy scripts after successful attestation. It can deploy keys and certificates. It can also revoke those keys and certificates based on attestation status, and it can basically like continuously attest your device. So it's incredibly flexible. You can also define these custom policies, like I said earlier. For example, we don't like this kernel, we want this kernel. These hashes are fine, these hashes are not fine. So if you want to look at actually practically using this, I don't have like the time and the room here to go do a deep dive on this today, but I included the GitHub link. It's open source, so you can modify it as much as you want. And it also has like support for Kubernetes and a lot of like, it's very big and it has a lot of things going for it. Okay. Before I wrap up, I want to take a quick look at the future. And I think the future is a lot about dealing with these sort of golden values. If you have to fingerprint everything, it is quite a hassle. Like it's doable, but it's not ideal, and it's quite a hassle. And we would like to potentially collaborate with like OS vendors, where the OS vendors know what the kernel is supposed to look like. They know these values, they know these hashes, and then your service could, for example, just send the hash to some API endpoint from an OS vendor, and the OS vendor can tell you, oh yeah, this is a valid Ubuntu kernel, for example. So making it easier to get these golden values. And a second thing is also that we get a uniquely identifiable hash from software, and we can prove like, okay, these pieces of software are running on our system. It would also be nice if we could maybe link this to software bill of materials, because they are also uniquely linked to that software. But of course, that requires the hashes to match and requires everyone to build all software using reproducible builds. I know there's some work on that, but we're not quite there yet. So yeah, future work is mainly on this whole golden value thing. So I have reached the end of my presentation. I don't actually know how long I spent talking. I think when I go a bit quick every now and then. But the key takeaways here are that remote attestation can be a very nice tool for your PDEs. It can give you continuous reporting on a device state in a manner that is like cryptographically signed and cryptographically secure. It's not for every PDE. That's also why I gave you these 3 levels. Sometimes it just doesn't work. If you don't have the hardware or you can't support it, then yeah, you just can't do it. But then I would like to tell you to definitely keep in mind your root of trust and what you're actually trusting, and take that into your like risk analysis and all of that. That if you trust the Linux kernel, you are aware of the fact that you are putting all your trust in that. So yeah, it all depends on your risk analysis and the actual feasibility of doing it. Okay, this was my talk. We have some time for questions. If you want any more info on any of this, there's a lot of really interesting stuff on our CRACY website. I'm going to now move back to the webinar screen and see is there are any. Oh, there are questions. Yes.
Yeah, the one from Philip on most of these requirements for PDEs require cryptographic modules, TPM, secure boots. Some of these capabilities most IoTs don't have. So
yeah, I think I was a bit more clear on this at the end. There are levels to this, and like this is in my opinion, the most secure you could make your device. But I think the CRA text itself actually also talks about like the feasibility of things. And yeah, you are right that if you have IoT devices, this is not possible. And something like secure boot would probably be your best option. So it is sort of up to you to like analyze your systems and see what is possible. I'm just presenting the different ways you can do it and presenting like remote attestation as sort of the final boss of integrity checking. But it is definitely not that if you cannot do this level, then you cannot sell your products in the EU. If that answered the question.
Okay, then Flavio one on there are any other kind of attestation we need to provide apart from SBOMs, or if they need to provide a facility for third parties to verify attestation, how they need to verify encryption keys, no keys.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure on how to answer that one. I think all of it's still to me also not very clear what exactly you're required to report here. Yeah, these techniques give you cryptographic evidence, and they're probably going further than what the CRA would expect from most of your PEs and your devices. So yeah, I don't have a super clear answer on that one.
Yeah, also, Flavio, on the 1st of June, we are having a webinar on recommendations for attestation documentation. So there, some of these topics will be covered. So what types of attestation documentation do you need? What type of evidence you will need to provide for your PDE? How the different documentation, information, declarations, all they fit together. So yeah, I mean, we can recommend you to go there because yeah, after all, you will need to provide the EU declaration of conformity. So that's something. And as for the third-party verification, well, you would need to be verified by a third party in case that you are a critical or important class 2 for sure. And if you have important class 1 product, if there are no vertical standards available, you will need to also go for the third-party assessment. So if that asks the question on the third parties to verify the attestation. And I will also look for the link to the recommendation for the attestation documentation, and I will send you via chat, Flavio. Okay, it's here. And indeed, 1st of June. There you have it. Okay.
Okay, that looks like all the questions we got. If anyone thinks of anything or anyone's watching recording, feel free to like contact me or something if you have any more technical or practical or questions or whatever.
Yeah, and we will also start collecting the different questions that pop up during these webinars. We have them recorded, and I'm providing them also via the different tabs within the website, the different events. So in case that any of the questions posed here today you want to have more information, we will try to provide them under the website. If not, also again taking the chance to very briefly let me see. Okay, there we go. Share my screen just to highlight the fact that some of the additional webinars that we have ongoing. One is this one, the 1st of June, on recommendations for attestation documentation. There, I think that is delivered by TimeLex, which are our legal partners. But here, especially bringing your attention to the Monday ENISA webinar. So we have managed to have ENISA at this webinar. They will provide an update on the single reporting platform that will be launched in September 2026 in order to comply with the different incident reporting requirements, obligations that become enforceable by that time, by the 11th of September 2026. So we highly encourage that you go there. It will be for sure a very interesting webinar, and you will get to know also some of the vulnerability reporting obligations that will be present not that long ago. I mean, it's just 4 months to go. So this is already September 2026. And having there the authority itself explaining it, yeah, that's a great opportunity. Check the website also for some of the upcoming webinars. And again, as mentioned all the times, get in touch with us. Don't go at it alone. We can have these webinars. We can have the different guidance, the white papers that, as you have asked, they will be made available soon, and we will all let you know about it. Secure your PDEs, but again, bringing again the attention to the point that we are developing use cases hand in hand with you, with PDE manufacturers. Get in touch. This is pro bono, so these services are free of charge. We will help you understand your Cyber Resilience Act compliance roadmap, understand what are the different requirements that apply, how you can fix those or fix the potential gaps that there are in your different processes. So let's keep in touch. Any additional doubt that you would like to get answered or information that you would need, contact us at info@cracy.eu. Again, Jordi, thank you so much for the super presentation, and all of the attendees, thank you for coming in here. Thank you also for coming on the days, and see you next Monday at either the ENISA webinar or also the one on identity and access management for products with digital elements. That is also happening on Monday, I think, if I'm not mistaken, at 3:30. So again, thank all of you. Let's keep in touch.